So I'm Carl Bickmore. Right now, you'll see us in the vendor pavilion as Raven Automation, but really I'm putting my SnapTech IT hat on right now for this conversation because I've been the CEO of a MSP for quite a while. Now, how many of you here are MSPs? Okay, quite a few of you. So that's really the viewpoint that this comes from. And I guarantee you there are those of you in the audience here that are ahead of us as well. But I think there's a few things that we were able to get out in front of that we'd like to share our experience. And so I've got Jared here. How many people have seen Jared on something with Roost? Yeah, I can see a few hands. So, you know, I just feel lucky to work with Jared. He's a great guy, smart guy. And this is going to be a fun story to tell because our automation journey had all the things that Aaron talked about on the zero side, you know, when we talk about the maturity. So, okay, here we go. Oh, yeah, there we go. Building a culture of automation. It's funny, I had this question in the pavilion yesterday. It's like, so how do you actually build a culture of automation? I'm like, hey, come to the talk tomorrow. We might talk about this a little bit. So the beginning, traditional MSP model, reactive support, professional services, knock, SOC, the way that all of us learned to build our MSP. Right? Typical service delivery issues, human error, excessive time on user onboarding. How many of you have had that experience of, oh man, that new computer setup for that user and everything getting ready took like 18, 20 hours? It's just the dirty secret. We don't like to talk about it, right? It's like, oh crap, what happened there? Innovation from our team wasn't very strong. Sorry, Jared. He actually wrote that line, I'm just saying. But he was really part of doing our RMM management, running our knock and SOC for us. And Jared, why don't you just introduce yourself and a little bit of your background in the MSP space as well?
My name is Jared Brantley. I am the Chief Automation Officer for Raven Automation. Kind of got my start back in late 2009, early 2010, working with the traditional break-fix MSP model. Eventually kind of moved through from one company to the next in various positions. In 2017, started doing some automation consulting with the more traditional RMN tools, and eventually continued the path. I'd say over the last 15 years, I've probably worked with 50 different MSPs across North America, and have just had the great opportunity to learn a lot along the way.
Yeah, and I always say, you know, Sean, my business partner, is here with me. It's like we kind of lucked out. He lived like a mile from our office and wanted a different job, and I think that's a big reason why we got him. What's up, Jared?
2.5 hour round trip commutes are not very fun. So I love the, well, at this point, I just wake up and kind of walk into the office now. But
yeah, now it's even closer for you, right? So we've been in the industry for a long time, right? Well, some of you longer than us, but long enough that we've seen a few waves come and go. How many people have been around long enough to remember when RMM became a thing for the first time, right? How many remember the revolution of the backup management system that we had to talk all of our people and our customers into? And then the more recent one, the wave, maybe the wave into the cloud that we all rode into. Like, you know, how many people are delivering Office 365 or a Google Workspace rather than an on-premise Exchange server, right? And everybody's doing that right now. And then the cybersecurity wave, right? These are all things that we've seen come and go. I love that way of thinking of the early adopters. I was thinking to myself, I got to tell my wife I'm a 1%er. That's what I heard today. You know, so oh wait. But the key thing is this is just the next version, isn't it? Right? It's funny. Aaron said earlier that the automation tools will become as ubiquitous as the PSA and RMM. How many think that the RMM and PSA is on the laggard area and on the trailing down, and the automation tool is the next wave? Yeah, I see a few hands up here on that. I think that's where our head's at, is how long do those tools even stay relevant? And that's why this became so important. It was a few years back when we were having a conversation, Aaron and myself. He had just finished up the ConnectWise journey that he had, and he was thinking about what was next. And he started talking about this idea he had around automation. And I'm like, oh, that's amazing. Well, we automate things. We got Jared. He does cool things with Automate Server. It's automating things, right?
yes, definitely automating different things. But when we really look back, I mean, we have the gift of looking back and seeing everything in perfect 20/20 vision. The things we were building really weren't impactful. They were cool, but they really didn't have a significant impact on the business.
Yeah, yeah. And so when I heard this thing that apparently has been going on for a while in the enterprise space or in banks around this automation stuff that was connecting these disparate systems in a low-code, no-code way, the vision started to grab me, and I said, oh, this is exactly what we need to get on. And I've been saying this a lot. I don't think we're particularly geniuses or anything. I just keep my head up and I try to see what's next and then try to move there at least a little bit before some people. And I love the point about differentiation that he make. I mean, that is definitely where our mindset is. How many times are you going in to explain to a customer how great your MSP is and you're not able to say something that anybody else is going to say? Now, you may say, but I do it better, but it doesn't ring that different to them. But when you're bringing up things the customer hasn't even heard, well, that's where automation is right now, and it's exciting. It's exactly where we were all at with the cybersecurity conversation maybe 10 years ago, 8 years ago, something like that. And it still works today, right? So what were the cases for the change? Why do we see the need for this? Well, we had customer issues. We had process execution issues. When it has humans involved, you have the possibility of human error, right? We needed to grow. We had hit our plateau. We needed to find a new way to approach the market. We needed to be improving our morale. Jared, tell me a little bit about what it's like. You know, you ran our NOC team. You were part of our executive leadership team. You were a member of the team. What was the problem with morale on our tool set?
Well, I mean, when it comes down to it, it's no secret that the highest turnover positions that we have in MSPs are always our more lower level, entry level help desk reps. And while, you know, password resets and things like that are great and they're just part of the business, there's no reason that we should have processes like that that are that simple that have to be repeated by a human over and over and over again. So, you know, by not having automation in place to handle that, we were getting into situations where these guys were getting burned out. You know, it was time for them to do something else. And that's why you would see so many people come into those roles. They'd be there for 6 months, a year, you know, whatever the case may be for that person. And the next thing you know, they're sending their resume to the MSP down the street because they're looking for growth opportunities.
Yeah, I like to say, and it's Jared who taught me to say this, the mundane, the repetitive, that's not why people get into IT, at least most of us. Most of us want something intellectually stimulating. We want to puzzle. We want to solve problems. We want to make people happy, right? And doing these rote, repetitive things are necessary. And that's the dirty secret, right? Is a lot of the things you're going to accomplish with automation are things that your customers kind of think you're doing today, but actually isn't even happening because you never get to it, right? And automation solves that problem. Suddenly you're doing all of those things. So how do we differentiate ourselves with automation? Like I think Aaron laid out the best case out there. Just explain to the customer and help them understand and ask them how long it takes to do is a really great way of doing it. But that is the game. The MSP space is saturated. Everybody's got an MSP. Aaron said, hey, you know, hopefully they have an MSP. How often do you run into an opportunity and they don't already have one? It's pretty rare these days. But even if you do, you're angling, you know, to look at how they're building their internal IT, and the question's still the same: how long does it take to get something done? The other thing is look, we see the case for change comes from leading in the industry. I always want to be on the next wave, as Joe said. You know, we're willing to jump in, we're willing to drown a little bit to try to find our way, but we find that's always a way to differentiate, and it's always a way to make sure our company stays relevant. And then the last thing is we think this is a big deal in helping us retain clients. So this is a fun part of the culture piece. Explain where my mindset was, and then Jared's going to explain where his mindset was, because Jared did not initially see the vision, which is hilarious now because I feel like he is the number one, you know, let's do the automation guy. And at first, he had all those things that Aaron talked about. So I was frustrated. Our new solutions, we kept adding things and they were sucking time. We weren't getting headway from it. We weren't seeing the dropping to the bottom line. We were just seeing more tools to do things, but more management and more mess. I was annoyed as an owner. I needed more. We had the best RMM team and it still wasn't meeting the demand. We still couldn't get things done. Exasperated. Users and computer setups weren't getting better and faster. That was one of the initial visions I put out in our company a long time ago. I said, we need to get like the user experience. Like the number one change you make that makes your customers frustrated is a bad new user setup or bad computer deployment, right? And so why can't we get those so they're just unbelievably smooth, but unique and different for every client's specific needs? I was irritated. The team wasn't looking into the future. And the offerings lacked innovation. We just didn't have a way to bring anything new to the table that was different than what had said. So then I said, we have to shift and focus on our automation to solve these challenges. At the time, there wasn't really even a lot of choice, but I do love that this is a vendor-neutral experience, and I always appreciate that. Is exactly how Perch was as well for Aaron back in the day, that you could bring threat intelligence from anywhere, and there's ability to do that. I think that it's always important to have everybody at the table and all conversations to be had, and I like it when vendors think that way too. It helps all of us when we have that. So we decided to go with Roost, and we decided that Jared was going to be the man. And so I had said, hey, Jared, we're going to do this new thing called Roost. Now, what was your initial response to that?
Let's back up a second. So I was not initially chosen to be the man.
Oh, that's true. That's true. It's true. Okay.
I was part of the committee, if you will. And as someone that deals with ADD, one of my challenges is we would get on these weekly calls as we're going through our initial onboardings, and I have our director of service delivery on the calls with us, and I have our essentially our IT manager that kind of managed all of our internal security and everything else. And let's just say we're working with a product that was really, really early in its stages and really needed some more maturity and growth, right? Because that's the way we all are when we go into business.
It's not ready.
Yeah, so about that. So as we're going through things, we have the other 2/3 of the committee talking through different issues and really putting up roadblocks. All my mind saw was red tape. I stopped listening and I started multitasking and doing other stuff on all of those calls. So we made no progress whatsoever. So needless to say, yeah, tool owners were assigned, but then tool owners were reassigned. And as Carl's going to get on here in just a moment, there were some, we'll say pep talks that were given. Because quite honestly, I wanted absolutely nothing to do with the tool when it first came around. My mindset was I had enough to do already. I really didn't need anything else on my plate at that point in time.
Yeah, I like that. Pep talks were given. It's funny. It's rare as a leader that I fully assert myself in the sense of like, no, this is something we really need to do. But I did find myself getting to that stage a little bit. And so it's interesting. I did a poll. I'm just going to bring this up real quick in the Whova app. I had several respondents to it. And I said, does your organization struggle to adopt the culture of automation? Which option closest fits you? And the greatest responses, one of them is, we have good momentum, but it's taking too long to get ROI. We're wondering if we're missing something, or we won't have the needed breakthroughs to fully embrace. Another one that's a really high responding, and this is the highest response, is we're building momentum and the whole organization loves the idea. That was not us. There's another one that has a lot of response here, is we are just getting started and there are skeptics. I would say that was a little bit closer to where we were at. It's like, oh, why do I need these tools? What's going on? In fact, I think another one that says, and I put this one because this was exactly where I was. It says, as an organizational leader, I could see the vision of automation, but my technical team remains skeptical of the new methods and tools. That's exactly where we were at. And so I was, he's like, hey, I'm really great at automate. I can do all these things. What is going to happen? Why do we build it? So I did eventually say, Jared, you don't understand. You're the guy. You have to do this.
Well, I was living in that level 0 maturity model. Hey, guys, we're already automated. I don't need another tool for this. I've got it under control with our RMM tool.
Right. And so, true to I think the way Aaron positioned it today when he's doing them, and I hadn't seen his maturity model, but that was pretty is okay. It was pretty good. I was kidding. I loved it. We were totally in that space where we had to see this next step. And I love this is Jared's comment here. Great. One more thing.
Yeah, I mean, there may have been some other words that aren't really appropriate for a slide that was in that quote, but yeah, I mean, nonetheless, at that point in time, I was running a NOC team. I was trying to build a SOC. I single-handedly did most of our internal tool management. Time was just something I didn't really have, So before the world of RPA, there were a few things that were kind of going on in my mind. Number one is I was really comfortable with my job. I had worked with the same RMM tool for a decade, so it was pretty much a cakewalk for me. I'd argue to say that I was probably pretty complacent because no one else in the company did any of the things that I was doing. So I'd become really comfortable with that. But more importantly, I was also starting to get a little burned out along the way because, again, I was the only guy doing these things. And it really felt to me that no one else in the organization understood the time or effort that it took to deliver some of those automations that we were doing with our RMM tool. So that kind of led on to the point where I was really starting to question my future. You know, here I am, I'm 41 years old. I've been in the MSP space for 15 years. What the hell do I want to do now? You know, there's only so much that's out there at some point. So, you know, it's safe to say that I had become bored along the way because, again, I'm doing the same job pretty much every single day. I'm like that level 1 tech that's doing a password reset over and over and over again. But the real deal was when it came to Roost and a new tool, I was really afraid. You know, at that point in time, all of the documentation pages for Roost had the wonderful word of placeholder. Jinja was this entirely new language for me. And even though automation is what I do, I still don't consider myself to be a developer. I'm sure that there's tons of people out here in this crowd now that are far greater than I am in terms of those skills. You know, so kudos to all of you guys. But really, when it came down to it, I was afraid.
I think this is a key insight here when you're saying you can't get the culture to move towards believing in the vision of automation. There's no doubt per Aaron's maturity model that there needs to be a visionary leader, somebody that sees that this is the thing that you've got to do. Without that, without the leader's support of it, it won't see it through. And so you've got to find a way to have the vision of how this is the next wave. This is the thing that's going to keep your relevancy. But then your team has to get on board with that. And remember, although they might say different reasons why, it's not ready, or I can't do this, or I have this concern, or this my thing, it might be just that you're asking them to do something that they're uncomfortable with. And so how can you as a leader find that true underlying cause and help them through that process? So that journey was an exciting and interesting one, but it didn't take long for Jared to suddenly be going like, oh, these things are working. This is amazing.
Well, before that, I had to kind of have my own internal monologue.
Yep.
And yeah, sometimes I do talk to myself and call myself dude. Anyway,
The dude
so
abides.
yeah, the internal thought that I was really battling with was, this is going to expose how much or how little I really know at this point. You know, I've done the same job now for a decade. You know, I don't build Exchange servers anymore. I don't really do, you know, troubleshooting or desktop support anymore. All of those skills are, you know, locked in a closet somewhere gathering tons and tons of dust. So, you know, this new tool is really going to expose my weaknesses, and nobody likes to do that. No one likes to talk about their weaknesses.
So then there came day one, logging into Roost.
Yeah, so day one, I wake up, I'm in the Matrix now. I have no idea what I'm looking at.
I'm going to do my best Keanu. Whoa.
It's not bad. It's not bad. So yeah, I mean, day one of logging into Roost, this is kind of what it was. It was nothing. I had no idea what I was doing. We were just trying to figure things out along the way. You know, worked with some really great guys on the rock along the way to try to figure out things I was doing wrong. But as your typical tech, I also didn't like to ask for help. So I spent a ton of time, well, plug your ears for this. So I spent a ton of time and wasted a lot of time trying to figure things out before I asked for help. But as we fast forwarded a couple of months into the first workflow that we were building, there was suddenly some clarity starting to appear. You know, we could actually see things in the matrix, if you will. You know, we suddenly discovered, okay, great, we can start to do things. I can do this. We can build some automations and really, really drive our business forward.
So the results. The very first workflow we put into production that was fully automated, meaning no user interaction at all. But there's nothing wrong with having automations that involve user interaction. That's a great way to get a lot of things done and still save a lot of time. But that is kind of the holy grail when you get some of these functioning where there's zero human interaction and it's doing it correctly and every time. Why don't you talk about that one?
Yeah, so like I said, I wasted a ton of time. Some of the things that we needed to get this workflow into production, we identified some bugs along the way. Some of you that were really early users might remember when that whole context switching came about so that we could swap from one org into another in the workflow. Long story short, I spent literally 98 hours of my time building a dark web monitoring process. Tried to choose something that was simple. As it came along, it really wasn't quite as simple as I initially thought. But my actual cost to the business at that point, it was a total of about $8,700 for my cost to the business to build that. But the beauty of this is we chose a process that the team had to execute so frequently that even though we did this in 2022, we actually recovered all of those dev costs that year. It took just over 6 months, almost closer to 7, I guess, but we were able to recover all of those costs. Now, as we jump into 2023, that's really where we start to see the benefit of the automation. We could see that when working dark web tickets, because we were actually billing time to those tickets from Roost, we created a fake technician named Einstein, and we had 356 hours billed for that process. But we were able to cut that back to a point where only about 11 and a half hours actually involved a human doing some work. So that's, for quick math, something like a 97% reduction in human effort to provide that service. But when we look at it from a dollars and cents aspect, we were able to reduce the cost to provide that service by almost $20,000. We were able to go to a point where, okay, great, we're charging customers every month for dark web, but for the entire year, it only cost us $672 in labor to provide that service. So it's a tremendous gain that's possible with some of these things.
But so what are some of the cultural things that we did to make that happen, to even know that that's happened? First of all, we kept looking at our reports. We had a common QBR report we give with our clients, and we look at the common tickets that are building. And there were 2 major categories of complete, almost all false positive nuisance tickets, but something we couldn't just let go. They still need to be responded to. That was phishing alert requests and then the dark web. And so we actually looked at these as a team and said, oh, these are the ones that are super annoying. And Jared's like, yeah, I think I can automate that. That's how we picked that. So we looked at the things that would have the impact that would change the technician's life because we're struggling to keep up with some of those level 1 tasks. And these are mostly nuisance tickets. There's all sorts of nuisance tickets like that, some type of backup situation that you've got to deal with. There's all sorts of ways that we're saying, okay, what's going to be the impact to the business? And then we said, Jared, when you build these things, we also need to know how long that would have taken a human. Now, we took a very conservative approach. If it takes a human 15, 20, 30 minutes, we kind of just count it as 15 minutes. So when we talk about our hours, we're going on the low end because I don't want to overinflate this stuff and start doing stuff. Anybody remember the dream of I'm going to have automate billing my clients because it's going to restart services and bill 15 minutes every time it does something like that? That was a thing that was being said in the industry. And I talk about, no customer's going to pay those bills when they see that extra $5,000 on their bill because of all these things that happened. It just didn't work. But what does work with this is we are changing our technician's life with these really annoying tickets, and we are getting to the tickets we needed to get to, which were the customer request tickets by the same team that was doing them. That's where that's really changed. And so am I seeing the ROI? Did I just make millions and millions of dollars as a business owner? No, but a $20,000 win after $20,000 win after $50,000 win after $30,000 win stacking up builds some amazing momentum. That's the vision that you have to have around the culture of this. It's not about having amazing big wins. It's about solid ground taking every day with new automations.
Yeah, the real success from an automation perspective, it doesn't come from one magical workflow that solves all of your problems. Real automation success is the aggregation of small gains. It's little things, 5 minutes here, 10 minutes there. Before you know it, that's added up to hundreds of thousands of dollars in labor you're saving every year.
It's just like how do you get your EBITDA going in better space by looking at your expenses. That $300 expense a month, you got to be clean about that as much as the one that's $8,000. There's things that you got to do to understand they build momentum. So suddenly Jared's going, what do I do here?
Well, that's part of it. So as a quick show of hands, how many of you here are automation engineers?
Yeah.
And how many of you feel like everyone else in your organization truly understands what it is that you do and what it takes to do that? You know,
I get one maybe.
We're at the wrong conference for this question. But, you know, the last event where we used this slide, you know, the room was pretty much full of hands showing that nobody really understands what it is that we're doing here. So it becomes kind of our job as those automation resources to champion ourselves and explain what it is that we're doing and how it benefits everyone else. You know, while building the culture is absolutely something that leadership needs to be doing, you have a role in that too. You have to talk about what you're doing, you have to talk about those wins, and you have to show your colleagues how what you're doing can help make their lives better.
Incoming KPIs, incoming measurement, incoming business case analysis, applying these things meaningfully and prioritizing to the business. So during the transition, there were dark moments. There were moments where things weren't working. We were paying for a little bit of an expensive guy, and then we added a second guy to that team. It wasn't cheap either, and we're dedicating him to this, and it took a little bit of holding on, saying, man, when are we going to get there? When are we going to see this? So I think during the mindset, as things came up or reasons came up to hold us back, my mindset was we have to keep the vision. We're making progress, stay focused, don't give up. Tactical, I kept working on building strategies with the team, with my executive team. We all worked on it together. Prioritizing, aligned and communicating, making sure he's talking about the things they're doing. Justifying, we're tracking our gains with KPIs. Driving the team to think automated over manual. What would it take to automate this? If it took a little bit more to automate this for this customer, but then we would never have to do that manually again. Why wouldn't that give us the value we want to? Oh, but there's an extra 4 hours we spent that we can't bill for. Okay, that's fine. Maybe we figure out a way to bill for it, but honestly, once you have it in the bag, now you're providing amazing service to your customers. Figure out a different model, and you're still gonna prioritize this, you're gonna win, and your people are gonna be happier. The revolutionary, at the time that we were doing this, like you said, we're less than 1% today, maybe in a context worldwide. But at the time we were doing this, I just really didn't know anybody else that was thinking about this other than maybe 4 or 5 other MSPs, which were really great to talk to. But this was my idea. I wanted to be ahead of it, right? So we began building the culture. We went all in on automation, and we started with the leadership team. We needed to have our entire leadership team on board supporting let's call it the cost drag that had started that we weren't yet seeing the advantage on. Then second resource was showing the ropes. A guy who now swears this is the best job he ever had, and he was a great guy, but apparently was getting to the spot where maybe he was going to move on. And so that huge win by moving our secondary guy into that. We created a submission and tracking process. Maybe you could talk about that, Jared.
Yes, you know, so one of the things that we really needed to do was, okay, that whole concept of a center of excellence, if you will, for automation really resonates, because as the guy building automation, I'm not the guy answering the phone and working with our customers and really following all of those documented processes that we have. So we needed input from the team on where to spend that effort to make life easier for them. So what we did is we created a service board in our PSA. We called it the dev board. We then used Roost actually to build a form so that our team could submit those requests. But what we did with that is we also had those team members tell us, how long does it take you to do this manually? And how often do you have to do this task? So now we've got this built into a form process, and those tickets are getting created, and based on their responses, we're doing some math in that workflow so that ticket's now telling us how much time we can spend on it. You know, for us to work on those things, we created an internal goal that every automation we built needed to be profitable within 3 months of implementation. So now that we know the goal and we know the math, we can figure out what it is, you know, what's it going to take for us to hit that. And we can now use that to determine, is this something that we should work on this quarter? Should this wait till next quarter? You know, and then at that point, we now have a system where we're tracking everything. And we're doing some quarterly roadmap work, which I'm stealing a point later, but we're now sending out some quarterly roadmaps where the team is, you know, showing, here's all the automations we're working on this quarter. As we finish those, these are the things that we have, you know, on the list to do next. Oh, and by the way, here's our list of backlog. If there's anything that you need from that list addressed now, let us know so that we can go ahead and revamp our roadmap and make sure that we're dedicating the time to that.
So we already had a method of knowing our team's cost because we tracked the profitability of our clients in our MSP business heavily. So this was just a matter of figuring out the math. We don't have a ton of time left, so I'm going to move through some of these last pieces, but we have a few example calculations of ROI. We have more of these we can share with you at the booth if you're interested. But basically, we found ways of saying average tech cost, what does it take the time to develop, and when do we get the ROI out of it? And it's a good target. The 3-month line is a really good line. It's pretty easily done, and it's something that means that you get to the service of ROI quicker. One of the answers a lot of folks gave is, I'm not sure we're getting to the ROI. And then I challenge you, do you have a goal for when you're going to get this automation to an ROI? It's up to you. As business leaders, you got to set the tone. Every employee needs to know that you aren't replacing them with automation. That's a big deal. This is about them doing more interesting, better work, and you can scale without hiring as many more people. The reason you're building automation is to drive future growth, and you're removing mundane and repetitive tasks for more challenging work, more interesting work. So here's your call to action. Build your strategy. Make sure you know you're not replacing your team. Submission and tracking process. Even encourage everyone to submit ideas. One of the things that I really liked about our vision early on is this is not just about IT automation. In fact, the long vision of this is definitely out to our customers and automating their business. This is business process automation. And some of those processes in our IT company are IT processes, but plenty of them are things like our accounts receivable process, or our HR process, or our hiring process, or any other number of processes that you might have in your business. Never criticize an idea, but offer explanations for rejected ideas. Build a positive culture around it, and incentivize automation ideas, track your results. Any comments there?
Yeah, I mean, when it comes down to it, I really want to restate that. Encourage everyone to submit every idea possible, even if they don't know that it can be done. And for those ideas that really aren't very good ones, do not criticize those things, because you're going to kill your cultural journey as you're building this.
This is just like the same thing we learned from guys like Patrick Lencioni on building a team of trust, right? We have to make sure that people trust you, and it's a safe place. That's why you want to not criticize, but encourage more ideas, and take the ones that are best, and you always work with the one that's going to give you the best ROI that will meet your goals. So.
Yeah, and if you're tracking all of those metrics like you should be, it becomes very easy for you to put a price tag on those automations, and now you can go back and reward that team member for an idea through some kind of incentive bonus or other ways to really get their buy-in and drive more automation to enhance your business.
Awesome. Well, I appreciate it. I think we're at our time. Nobody's giving me signals. I don't have alarms, but I think I saw that we're at our time, so I really appreciate it. Oh, we're good? Okay, we can take questions. Okay, sweet. Do we have anybody that has any questions for us then?
Oh, I do.
Oh, hey, Joe, what's up, buddy?
And I just want to check with Ed. We got about 15 minutes. Yeah,
oh, okay. Rats. I must have screwed up the time. Pardon me.
That's great. That's great. It's my only job here, keeping us on time. Okay, so the room, right?
Yeah.
There's some MSP owners here, but then there's some employees of those owners. And I want to connect the dots between what you've shared and then the ultimate business outcomes, right? And some of the ultimate business outcomes, whether you're speaking with Gary Pica or Arlen Sorensen, et cetera, it's always a math problem. How do you improve your EBITDA? How do you improve your company valuation, by improving your EBITDA? So, for the owners that are in the room, two-part question. Part A is, for the owners in the room, do you think this automation ultimately is going to improve MSP EBITDA with the best MSPs, by the way, the top 25% of MSPs, give or take, are doing 20% EBITDA. The bottom 25% of MSPs are break even or losing money. Those are rough numbers from service leadership that I paraphrased. Go to service leadership to get the actual numbers. But do you see automation lifting the EBITDA, part one? Part two, do you see best-in-class MSPs somehow going from 20% EBITDA to 30, 35, 40% potentially? And then for the technicians in the room who aren't the owners, are there key messages they can share with the owners about the power of automation to raise the valuation of the business?
Yeah, well, okay, so there's a lot, that's a lot to chew on, so it's a great question. Thanks, Joe. And sorry, I screwed up the time. I thought we were done. Yeah. Okay, so the first question is, okay, so how do I think this affects the EBITDA as a business owner? I think that there's a couple of key critical ways that it affects an organization. One is I do believe this has a major EBITDA impact, but it's not immediate. It happens later as you get into using it. So the thing is you got to have a little bit of patience for it, but it does come. And it comes in a really meaningful way because eventually you find yourself getting all sorts of work done that people used to do that now they can do on other new clients. And so now you're operating with a greater technician ratio. You know, they always say you want a W2 multiplier 2.5, 3. You're going to see that multiplier grow with automation. And so to me, this isn't about building an organization that shrinks and becomes a fully automated organization. It's about getting people doing what people need to do and the mundane repeating things off the table that people used to do or that never happened. And that will affect your bottom line in a couple ways. One is you'll retain customers because you're now doing things that you didn't get to before. That's the dirty secret, right? Things are now easier and quicker than they used to be. Workstation setups don't go 20 hours anymore on a really bad, weird day. You have all sorts of things that you can line up and get done correctly. So I don't know where that journey goes. It's interesting because if you're watching the service leadership statistics, we're noticing that the best-in-class ratio for labor gross margin is actually dipping right now, which means even the best of the best are starting to see a dip. And I would argue it's because they're not doing things like automation. They haven't made that journey yet. I think this is the next wave. The other way that I think this ultimately helps your bottom line, and it's a funny answer, but it's because I think it helps your top line. And when there's more top line to go, you just have more opportunity to get things done. And so I think this is a differentiator that brings customers to the door. Right? So that's how I think this works from, and so if you want to talk to a business owner and say, hey, how can we get onto this automation journey? One, they have to understand. Like I had a conversation with a really good buddy of mine who's been an MSP owner that I respect. He's killer in cybersecurity, doing really great things. And I said, hey, we're doing all this stuff with Roost that happens to be the tool we picked. And he's got that guy that's killer at Automate that we've talked to many times before who is not interested. And so I said, well, that's crazy because like there's so many things you can't do without some additional tool set. And he's like, oh, really? So this is a guy who I consider to be really in the know. And he had no idea about the interconnectivity of systems and the way you could transfer an automation from like a user input form at an HR manager at a company to creating an account, provisioning it with Microsoft, setting up the computer deployment, deploying the applications to that user, all through automation, right? They didn't know that you can close the loop on seeing this condition here and drive automation and response over here and even interact with the end user if and when appropriate. So that's, I think, one of the biggest barriers is you may say things like, hey, yeah, we need to be in automation, but I would say that there's probably some pretty good business owners, pretty savvy business owners that like to watch their bottom line. They know what their numbers are, and they don't even know what automation really is. Right? And so I think that's a big deal. You gotta make sure you understand and connect the dots. But I would tell you, like any business owner who's interested should know that when you start making some of these ROI cases, when you build your automation with that kind of mentality and you're putting it out there against real life business problems, like what is your business owner struggling with? Well, for us, level 1 employees, executing well, doing a great job every time, reading the condition, responding quickly. Those are easy tickets to knock off, and now they don't have to do them anymore. Now my customers aren't complaining about it. It used to be, in our QBR reports, fish alerts was our #1 ticket category that would have to be done by somebody. So because we show clients, here's the top 10 types of tickets we did for you this last quarter. It was our #1. That's ridiculous. And so it's like, there's just so many ways that you can approach a business owner, but I think the biggest thing is like, look, what are your problems and how can automation solve it? If you think about it, you could probably come up with some pretty good answers that would help them understand. And I think just don't assume that they know. They're all smart people. They know a lot about the industry, but this automation thing for all of us is new. I was introduced to it a few years ago in a meaningful way. I would say that I'm still a neophyte, but I think I'm ahead of a few people, and that's what I try to do, right? So.
Yeah, I mean, there's another concept that we're not really talking about, but as we continue to make the push for all of our customers to get them into serverless environments and really do the cloud-first approach, You're also going to see some cases where your professional services hours and your project teams are really going to start to diminish because you're no longer doing those server refresh or hardware refresh projects every 3 to 5 years or whatever your cycle is. Well, now you have a way that you can go back and supplement those professional services projects by leveraging automation and identifying cases for all of the customers that you're managing where you can go in and add value to them and get them to pay for the automation, which absolutely does help drive some of those bottom line results.
Yeah, either through an onboarding project that they pay for or through some type of bespoke project. We found customers are pretty open to the idea of even helping us pay for the dev time, let alone the ROI that then comes to them and us. So I think that that's a pretty critical message, is just don't assume that they know, and just know that there is an ROI case to be had here, you know? Yeah, all right, great.
That's funny. I'm Chris, and I'm from an MSP in the Midwest.
Oh, close, Joe, close. Well done.
It's the bald gene, I think. For the guy, you said you were the RMM guy, you were doing all kinds of management there. How did you determine how much time to spend per day, per week on automation development, and how did you know when it was time to add a second guy? That's what we're struggling with now. I'm the guy, but I'm also 15 other guys.
Yeah, so you are.
How did that go?
Yeah, I mean, so when it comes to something like that, there was a little bit of muscle and feel, and honestly, a lot of complaining and me going back saying, guys, I need help. I can't get all of these things done. The reality is I was actually blessed to have some pretty good leadership in the organization that recognized some of those things and gave me the time to focus on building the automation. So that's really the key, is making sure that your leadership is in full support of the initiative and that they are making sure that you have the time to put towards that. Now, as far as adding a second resource, in our case, it wasn't immediate. So we added that second resource, and he was wearing lots of hats, helping with backups and helping with SOC alerts, and helping handle some of what I would call the lower hanging fruit that I didn't have time to get to, like software deployment scripts and things like that in the RMM. But in his case, one day I just started showing him a few things in Roost, and quite honestly, I got the hell out of his way. And before I knew it, he's now our senior automation developer at Raven, and quite honestly is the person that I go to now for help because we just found his natural potential. Yeah. So there was a little bit of luck involved in that as well, that it happened to be something really good for him. But it's one of those cases that you have to go back and show, hey, I have all of these things on my list. I cannot get to all of them. This is how much time it's going to take to do them. Help me understand the priorities. And if you're able to go in and present the case in that way, you're not immediately asking for help, but you are showing the workload that you have. And good leadership is going to recognize that and realize that this is the way that we need to commit and move forward.
Yeah, I can tell you from my perspective as an owner being approached with, hey, let's get another resource involved, it was purely a case of, like, we saw the backlog because we built a backlog system. We knew all the automations we had thought of, because that's the thing. Once you build a culture of automation, the ideas flow. Now it's like, what do I automate? It's not a question, it's what I automate next, right? And I imagine you're kind of in that zone, sounds like, right? And so to me, it's just been a case of, like, I can only work X amount of hours. There's only X possibility. We have this big of a backlog. How fast do you want these automations to hit? How fast do you want to get to the ROI of these things? That was the compelling case for me, if that makes sense.
Great, thank you.
Yeah. Got one right up here.
Hi, my name's Jack.
From Midwest?
No, from the South. So,
all right.
Dallas, Texas. Right. I'm an automation engineer. I have two questions. What is the smallest automation that had the biggest impact? And what is an automation you never would have thought of without your team's input?
Ooh, I think Jared should fill that one.
2 minutes or less, guys.
Oh, goodness. So one of the smallest automations that had a huge impact for us is every service ticket that comes into the MSP, gets an internal note placed for any open projects that that customer has. So that way the separate project team, they're not taking all of those inbound calls, but the help desk guys can immediately see that there's an open project on every single ticket and make the determination if they need to route it to the project team so that they're able to get to their next call faster.
It's the maybe I shouldn't work on this ticket right now.
Yeah, I mean, so it's harder to quantify the impact from a time and cost savings for something like that, but it's absolutely one of the most useful things that we did that was really, really minor.
Any of the surprising ones or that came from team suggestions?
Oh man, I don't even know where to begin. We've had so many different things. Another one that was really, really helpful is we would get some SaaS-based alerts for like Office 365. So if there was ever an email policy change, we had something that was set up for our SOC that would look at any ticket that had been worked related to that issue in the last 24 hours. And all it would do is put the ticket number as a note inside of there. So now the SOC analyst can just click the ticket numbers, read the notes, and make a determination if that was the issue or not, instead of having to go the old school route of publishing something into a Teams channel for all staff, or trying to track down whoever did anything, or worse, looking through the time entries for the day to see who had made what change. So
the reality is there's hundreds and hundreds of little nip tucks like that have been done that just, it's almost hard to imagine not having them now, but we forget about how others don't, I would say. All right, well, thank you everybody. It's been nice talking to you today. Appreciate your time.
Thank you.